Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we returned in 1981 for another of those interesting Marvel tales that winds up showing up as a book and record collection later on. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. The book and record collection, again, is something I had when I was a kid. You may recall that recently we looked at the issue of Marvel called Droid World, and that Droid World was made into a Buena Vista sort of read-along book with a little bitty record with it, and the book where, you know it's time to turn the page when you hear R2-D2 beep like this, and he makes his little beep, and you flip the page. Had new painted artwork, or what looks like sort of painted style artwork, compared to the Marvel series artwork by that particular issue's artist. And in this case, we have the same thing happening again. This is the only other edition of that Star Wars The Further Adventures series that we started with Droid World. Also released in 1983, it is referred to as Planet of the Hoojibs. And again, this is the version that has the record with it to actually hear the story. But it is also based on a Marvel Comics issue. It's Marvel issue number 55, not called Planet of the Hoojibs, simply entitled Pliff, named after a Hoojib leader that we see in the story. Yeah, no text on the cover other than, hey, you could still win that bike, like we saw in another recent episode here. It is a standalone story, but it does have an impact on the broader EU, especially the broader EU of the Marvel series itself. You find this these days in the pages of Star Wars Omnibus A Long Time Ago, Volume 3. The Rebels are still looking for a new base. The Imperials know about Golroth, which was their base back in the issue number 50, the Crimson Forever and whatnot. They've been kind of bouncing around looking for new bases. We saw that back in the Tarkin storyline recently. And here, we have them going to the planet Arbra. And it looks like Arbra will be a good base. It looks like it's a nice jungle. There's a good canopy. It's going to hide them from Imperial surveillance from above. Great place. Only one problem. When they go to sleep that night on their survey mission, they wake up and all their gear is powered down. Turns out this local native wildlife, these little teeny tiny creatures, I'll show you actually in the read-along book, you can see them just a little bit better. These little tiny creatures here kind of look like weird rabbit-type creatures known as Hoojibs, feed on energy. They just metabolize the energy directly. They don't need to eat something. They feed on the energy itself. And they've drained the power cells and whatnot. And it turns out that normally this would not have been an issue. The Rebels could have come there, set up a base, no big deal, no power loss, nothing. Except there's this monster, this creature, see it here, called a Slivolith. Also shown here. It's a lot less fully formed in the way that it looks in the actual Marvel comic. I mean, the head is not really all that formed. It's kind of weird. It looks almost like a blob-type creature in some respects there, the way that his face looks. I actually like the look better here because at least it's a little more defined. Suffice to say, this creature came to the world and is also going to feed on energy and Hoojibs and whatnot, and has made its home in the crystal caves where the Hoojibs had lived, where these crystals draw geothermal energy from the planet, so they're able to feed on it all that they need without needing to feed on other sources of energy, like C-3PO, like the blasters, like the other gear that the Rebels brought. So they enlist the aid of the Rebels to please help them get rid of the Slivolith. You might say, wait a second, aren't these like little animals? What do you mean enlist their aid? Turns out the Hoojibs are sentient and telepathic, so they're able to talk to Leia and the other members of the team. They work together, they lure the Slivolith into the crystal caves, and in the process of luring them in, they set a trap for him, so that once he gets in there, Chewbacca grabs him. You can see it here. Chewbacca grabs the tails of the Slivolith, or the one that I grew up with, kind of a similar image, grabbing the Slivolith's little tail things there, and slings him down into the crystals. Many of them shatter, but it slices through the body and kills the Slivolith. In doing so, they have freed the Hoojibs, but now they know that this is the Hoojibs' home. They don't want to damage the Hoojibs' home or put them in danger. The Rebels are going to leave. They're just not, they don't think that they are welcome there, and they're not going to impose upon the Hoojibs. Except Pliff, the leader of the Hoojibs, suggests, you know what? Taking this world from us would not be okay, but working together, living side by side, somewhat symbiotically, as Obi-Wan might have pointed out in the prequel era, that could actually work. So what do you say? And Leia gives the thumbs up. The Rebels now have their new base and a new ally on Arbra, and with the help of the Hoojibs. It feels like it could be just a quick little goofy throwaway story, but you figure it might be something more to it because they did the record and book thing with it. But, it's not something that a lot of people look back on and think of as, well, this story was hugely impactful. It really should be thought of that way, though. The Hoojibs are going to be a major part of the ongoing Marvel storyline all the way up until their final issue, number 107. They are a major Rebel ally and helper, and Luke and Pliff in particular wind up with a very good working relationship that they have going on. Not only that, but for the foreseeable future, the Rebels will be based mostly off of Arbra. So we have the introduction of a semi-permanent base for them at this point. With all of this going on, it's really hard not to call this an essential read. So, our question, is this an essential read? I would say yes. If you're reading the Marvel series, this absolutely is an essential read. To the broader EU, no. No, it's not. There's nothing in here that is groundbreaking in the overall grand scheme of things, at least not for its time. However, there is something to this that might make it of interest to a more modern reader that it would not have been prior to about 1999-2000. Turns out that this Slivolith, who had never been given any real background in the issue, was at one point suggested to be a Sith creation. Turns out it's not, is actually essentially what amounts to a probe droid. It is a probe sent by the Yuuzhan Vong, right? Living technology here, manipulated creatures from the Shapers and whatnot. This is a Yuuzhan Vong scout vehicle, basically, scout being, to go and check out our galaxy, a long-range, long-term scout from thousands of years ago. So this is actually, from a publishing chronology standpoint, the first time we see something that is definitively Yuuzhan Vong, at least as far as technology goes. On the other hand, though, because we did have the Riders in the Void thing, some people have said that that might be tied to the Yuuzhan Vong, but there's nothing confirming that at this point. This one is confirmed. Now, granted, chronologically in the EU, we wind up seeing a story prior to this, Rogue Planet, which introduces them as the Far Outsiders. But from a publishing standpoint, this is that first appearance, and anyone reading the Yuuzhan Vong storyline of the New Jedi Order is probably going to focus on the books and the Invasion comic series, maybe Rogue Planet as well. They should probably also check this out, because it's kind of cool to see that they had no idea what they were dealing with, but what they were dealing with was something that will tie into one of the greatest dangers that the galaxy has ever faced. It's kind of cool to look back at it now and see how they were able to tie things into future storylines, though of course the writers at this point in time had no idea that they were doing any such thing. The writer in this case being David Michelinie and the artist being Walt Simonson. We are now into our mainstream new series team for the Marvel series. So not essential, but pretty cool as a tie-in to the New Jedi Order. Essential for the Marvel saga though, just not the broader EU. We'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.